Hello, Donna Lozito, and hello to NYP, all our viewers, our pet lovers, our pet guardians, our pet parents. Donna, thank you so much for being here. You're all the way in Prescott, Arizona. How exciting!
Arizona.
How exciting! We are here in, well, I'm here in Hong Kong, and everyone else is from around the world and maybe even from your town, Arizona. I visited Arizona once. Of course, the touristic thing to do was Sedona, which was very, very special. I went away feeling really there something happened, some magic happened there. So I think you're in the right place for what you're doing. Donna, thank you for being here.
Thank
Everyone,
you for having me. It's really an honor to have this conversation with you.
it is. Everyone, we're having a conversation on a topic that I feel is so important and it's new to us. It's this beautiful soul connection we have with our animals, and I think Donna comes with a lot of wisdom. When I heard her speak, I was really very impressed, Donna, with the things you said. And first, let me introduce to everyone who you are. Donna Lozito is a professional interspecies animal communicator and nationally certified homeopath who has spent decades exploring the depths of human consciousness and the transformative power of compassion in healing. Her work with animals around the globe has enriched her understanding of how healing occurs through empathetic communication across species. Donna is a graduate of the School of Homeopathy, New York, and has expanded her knowledge through further studies in India and England with renowned practitioners. I'm very impressed with the India bit too, and she's the author of the children's book Sweet Dreams, The Talking Horse from Brooklyn, which explores themes of animal communication and friendship. So, Donna, this topic of soul connection is huge for me because I've always lived with between 3 to 6 pets in my house, doggies. And it's only after my second pet transitioned that I started delving into where did she go? Where did Gina go? And that propelled me all these questions because each pet had their own personality. But when the second pet transitioned, so many questions were not only where she went, but then I looked at the other pets and I go, how is it that they came into my life at the right time? They never transition at the right time. You're always in grief when they transition. But after they leave, there's something, another pet takes over that position. And I look at them and I wonder, how do they know me so well, Donna? And this is where I want the viewers to understand that our pets are so precious to us in the physical way, where we cuddle and hug them, and we get so much physical and emotional solace with them when we're lonely or sad. But there's something beyond that. There's something that these pets know, and just observing them has been groundbreaking for me. Observing them from another angle and the things that I've learned from them. And this is what I would like to ask you, Donna, and I'd like you to share with me and enlighten me what it is. So, first of all, how did you get into this? How did that happen with you?
Well, as a child, I mean, I came in with this love for animals. In my case, particularly horses. I had a very was just very passionate about horses, and no one could ever explain it. Um, but I related as a child more to animals than to people. I had a very traumatic childhood, so I tended to gravitate towards the animals. And at that time, I'm pretty sure I was conversing with the animals. It was a really difficult childhood. So the animals were my soft place to fall. And as I grew, our culture conditions out of us. As children, we come in and we know that animals can talk to us. We know that animals, but the parents, the culture, our societies, animals are somehow less, and oh, they don't have a soul, and oh, and that's kind of how I was raised, is that they don't have a soul, they don't have feelings, they don't, and I didn't agree with that even as a child, though I didn't have the voice at that time to express that, they do actually have feelings, and they do actually understand. But, culturally, and not everyone, but our culture as a rule, somehow animals are less and humans are superior. And as I grew, and certainly into my middle age, when I started to work, I decided to get myself a horse.
Mhm.
And I thought I was going to become Jackie O and go riding, and jumping and showing, and he was injured very early on in our relationship. And I couldn't understand what was going on. And so I picked this magazine up that said you can actually talk to animals. So when I read that article, I tried what she said, and I asked him a question about his injury. And I got a response back that was the most profound that I had ever heard. An animal, I mean, could this be that I asked this question, what's is wrong with his leg? And he turns around and gives me this whole dissertation about how the vets are looking at my leg and my immune system is really the problem. And I was like, what? And so I decided at that time to follow his lead and take him to a veterinarian who actually believed that animals can communicate. And we did exactly what he said to do, and his leg got better. And I thought, oh my God, that's what I'm going to have to do this professionally, because I could not believe he said to me when I asked him about the leg, he said, all of the veterinarians, they are looking at my leg. My leg isn't the problem, it's my immune system. If you boost my immune system, my leg will heal. And I thought, how could a being give this kind of information? And so I began to really look into animal communication. And what I discovered was that these these beings are spiritual beings, just like we, in a very different costume. So
Mm.
you're a human elephant, but we're spiritual. The spiritual essence of life possesses divine intelligence, which is energetic. And if life contains divine intelligence, there has to be a capacity to communicate. Hence, telepathic communication, which is the sending and receiving of information without words. So you could think something, and your animal knows what you're thinking almost before you do. So there's this connection, and that occurs occurs as an agreement before you both arrive on the planet, that this being is going to be your animal. We call them pets. Most animals don't like that word because that, demonstrates ownership, and they are free spirits.
Correct.
But that said, that's what humans do. So, they tolerate that word. And so there's this deep, deep connection, because animals reach a place in our hearts that sometimes humans can't touch.
Yeah.
And so we are so connected in that way because they're very heart opening. And I think that each relationship is different based on the lessons of the soul, the journey of the soul. And you're journeying together, just like you have agreements that you're going to meet this being or that being in this lifetime to what? To learn lessons and the spiritual sense.
Yeah.
Animals no different. No
Yeah.
different. So
Yeah.
there's an agreement for this being, this particular horse to come. And this horse taught me things that no human could have ever, ever taught me and or teach me. And I recognize that. And so this relationship, he changed the trajectory. My whole life changed. Then we began to study. Then he came down with a brain tumor.
Mm-hmm.
And he then communicated to do not give me conventional medicine because if you
Mm-hmm.
do that, then we're going to have two problems. We're going to have the problems we already have, which were quite a few problems, and then we're going to have a reaction to the medicine. So go find another way
Mm-hmm.
to heal this. He couldn't breathe. He couldn't shed his coat. He couldn't stand up. He was at death's door. And
Mm-hmm.
so I found homeopathic medicine and I watched him transform over a few years. And I thought, oh my God, then I have to study homeopathic medicine. So he completely took me from corporate America and moved me into holistic healing.
Correct.
And this is over now. It's 30 plus years that I'm actually talking to animals and using homeopathy as a tool for healing as opposed to conventional medicine. So you see, if we pay attention,
Mm-hmm.
if we're looking towards spiritual growth,
Mm-hmm.
your animal holds the ticket.
I believe
And yes,
I truly believe what you're saying, and I would love to hear when you said how your animal, your horse, taught you so many lessons, and I would love that. You know, when you say, how do we define Donna? And we'll get there because I'd love to hear those some of those lessons. How do you define the soul connection between a pet and a guardian? How is there, can you define that? Like, how different is that from an animal human bond?
it depends on the situation. I think that in each specific soul journey, you journey with other humans, you journey with a being that is an animal.
Right.
They're going to carry some lessons for you or
Yes.
reflect back to you what it is you need to see about how you can open up space for you to heal. Now
Right.
that requires that you look into the relationship and see, and it's not like someone can spell it out for you. It's like an internal sensing and an internal knowing that this particular being, like you're saying, your second animal was very specific and very different
Yeah.
from the first. And so there's this unique space in your heart that the second one, had the mission of really opening your eyes to something different.
Yeah. Were you were you already quite spiritual before this experience with your horse?
I think spiritual is an interesting word. I would say that that would not be how I would describe myself. I think that because of the trauma, it opened me up to a level of growth that needed to occur in order for me to heal these wounds, A, that I came in with, A, that were inflicted when I was a child. So that kind of left me in this empathic state.
Mm-hmm.
And so when a horse shows up like this, and I open my heart and in a way that had never been opened before, and I felt a love that I had never known existed, I knew that I was onto something different.
Correct. So when you first encountered, you know, this horse telling you, no, it's not my leg, it's my gut. By the way, your horse, what's his name?
Sweet dreams. His
Sweet
name was
Dream.
Sweet
Okay,
Dreams.
so let's call her him
Sweetie. We called him Sweetie for short. He.
Sweetie. Yes. So let's and it's male.
He was a male.
Okay, so let's call him Sweetie because Sweetie has a beautiful name. So when Sweetie said to you, no, it's not my leg, it's my gut, was that the first time you ever had that experience where you heard your animal speak to you? Was that the
Yes.
first time? And and at what age were you at that time?
I was already middle-aged. I was, I was in my early 40s at the time. I was, I just, I was working in New York City and I was having, the truth be told, I was attracting men in my life that were like my father, and I was like, I'm not going to do that again because my father was a handful for me as a child. And so I said, I'm not gonna do that again. I'm gonna get myself a horse. So,
Yeah.
and I opted to get a horse instead of getting married. And oh, look what happened. And I mean, never intending, I thought it was going to be a show jumper. So I
Yes.
didn't really think that I was, going to get into spirituality. And I mean, I
Yes.
followed my passion, is what I would say.
Yes.
Had absolute unexplainable passion for horses.
Yeah.
And when if you and we all have we're passionate about different things. So if you follow that passion, I can assure you it's going to take you to your soul's purpose. And I, unbeknownst to me, I no. So the answer to that is no. I was not on this spiritual quest. I
Yes.
was in love with horses and I decided to put one in my life. That's how that occurred.
So Sweetie took you on this amazing journey of self-discovery and and also understanding the higher intellect out there. There's a divine power out there. Now, when you say again, Sweetie came into your life to teach you lessons, and does that also apply for Sweetie? Were did Sweetie choose you to learn also from you?
Again, this depends on each situation. There was a
Mhm.
time when I asked him about that.
Mhm.
And this is the response that I got from our journey. He was standing in the field and he was looking at me straight in the eye and he said, I have been your guide, your spiritual guide for thousands of years. He said, I don't generally come into the physical, but if I didn't come in this time around, he said, you weren't going to get it. And I just looked, I couldn't believe my ears. And I thought to myself, he's absolutely right. Because I was so closed off and I was so shut down and I was backing away from humans because I was so traumatized. And this guy brought me to my feet. And so if you listen to that, he was my spirit guide for thousands of years. And that he had to come to the physical this time around in order for me to know who my spirit guide is, and B, really put a presence in my life because else I wasn't going to, I was that closed down. And so in answer to that, did he come in? Did he have horse issue? Yes. The answer is yes. The spiritual partner, it comes in and it benefits both spirits,
Mhm.
both souls on the
Mhm.
journey. The
Mhm.
animals in this particular case, you have sometimes, and many people can identify with this. There's just that one animal, like you can have 5 or 6 dogs, but there's that one animal that holds a place.
Mhm.
There's your ticket, there's your guide.
Yes.
And so what I would like to share is that when they pass, and I remember you saying that it's never the right time, it's always the right time.
Yes. But
They
when
do
that
not make
happens,
mistakes. They do
yes,
not.
they
They
do
do
not make
not make.
mistakes. Yes.
And according to our human agenda, they should live forever, or at least as long as we do. But that's not the agenda of the soul journey.
Mhm.
That's the agenda of our mind,
Mhm.
because our mind says, this being makes me happy. I want this being in
Mhm.
physical form with me at all times until we both leave pass together. And there's a contract that's written that doesn't exactly state that.
Yeah.
So, when an animal passes and it's never the right time as far as we're concerned,
Yeah.
but it's always the right time as far as the journey dictates. And
Right.
so, it's difficult to wrap your brain and heart around that when you've just had the greatest loss of your life. So it takes a minute to
Yes.
get with the reality of your journey, because what I've seen, and it's not always, it is generally the next chapter of the journey. The being really needs to be on the other side to guide you from another place, because that's the place you are in your journey. And when I say that to sometimes to clients, I could see that it registers, they don't exactly accept it because they want the comfort of what they know, but there's more to come. And that's what I mean, I experienced it. I learned this with him. It was the greatest loss of my life when this boy passed. But after he passed, I realized it was exactly the right time.
Yeah,
But it took 2 years for me to realize that.
correct.
So it's not, it's a journey of spiritual growth because the animals live and breathe in that that place of presence, of pure presence. They live in the present moment. They're not thinking about the bit. They're not thinking about, they're right here where they are in acceptance of where they are. Very different dynamic than us because we're thinking ahead and I mean, we're human. I mean, that's what we do. But the presence is really, if we pay attention, there's so much to be had
There is.
just from that piece alone.
You're right. You're spot on with that. For me, the biggest lesson was, and when I heard you say that, when I heard you speak, the present moment, that is so, so huge. And I will also, I'd like to get into that a little more because I think, see, Donna, from what I'm experiencing here in the East, and I'm sure also it's definitely must be in the West, we were going through a lot of issues, and we have been going through, and when I say issues, struggles in life. But what I'm seeing predominantly where that word loneliness, comes up all the time. So from children, teenagers, adults, that sense of dread and anxiety and loneliness. And I feel it's becoming a pandemic everywhere, and it's at all ages. And this is why I wanted to speak to you because yes, the people that do have animals, or the pets or animals, they hug them, they love them, and they feel, oh, okay, you are here. But I, like you said, the lessons you are learning, and when you got that first message, so what I went and did, Donna, was after my second pet transitioned, I always was under the impression that animal communicators, you had to really study hard for this, and there are special techniques, and you need certification and all. But then I realized, and so I did. I applied for a beautiful course. Along the way, I couldn't complete the course. I got sidetracked with a lot of other work, but I started experimenting with my own doggies at home. And I felt something. I felt there was one or two was saying something to me, especially one, my golden retriever. And that's where then again I went back and realized that, and this is what I want to ask you because you are, an animal communicator. Do you feel we all have this ability? Is like people that are just at home and go, oh, I want to experience what Donna did with her horse, with Sweetie. I want to be able to look at my pet and maybe ask a question. Do you think, without spending time going through an entire course necessarily, what is your opinion on that?
Well, I think that we are all more spiritual or spiritual in a way that we have been conditioned that we aren't. So
Yeah.
there's this layer of this belief system that I can do it and you can't. But that's not true
Okay.
because we are all wired for telepathic communication. It's just that our culture has shut down that part of that reality of who we are. So we that's why I say the children come in, they're doing it. And then the mothers will say something like, and certainly in my generation, you can't talk to us, stop it.
Yeah.
And so what does the child do? For the most part, will say, oh, I must be crazy. And so
Correct.
it becomes something that people call crazy. And it's not crazy. It's who we are. We are spiritual beings, every single one of us.
Yeah.
And I will emphasize that when there's this, and I understand that, Blank. I know that oh, I can't, because there's an unconscious message that really comes up in the face and fuzzes up the lines and the connection that
Yeah.
you actually have to hear the messages. What it requires is quieting the noise in your mind
Mm-hmm.
and dropping into a nanosecond of, you see that just in that second is the place where the information comes. It's telepathic, so it's energetic information that travels on these pathways, and it's they're sending us messages all the time. It's just that our mind is noisy, and as somebody's and you're telling yourself, I can't get it, or oh my God, nothing's coming. But I really urge you to give that a space
Mm-hmm.
and understand and at least observe
Mm-hmm.
that that might be a lie.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because if you can actually know the truth, then there's a possibility that you can work your way towards your truth.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that each and every one of us, plants can communicate, rocks can communicate, people can communicate, animals can communicate, bugs can communicate. There's a divine spark in all of us. And that divine intelligence, which is energetic, has to have the capacity to, it has to have, by definition, the capacity to communicate energetically.
Yeah. And that's what I love because when we get, we bring our doggy home, we adopt a dog or a cat and or even a horse, um, whoever's lucky enough to have space for a horse, because here in Asia it's not that easy. The first things we think of is how we are going to nurture, and take care of our animals. So we think about food, nutrition, play, the veterinarians, and all these things. But and there's play and there's fun and there's cuddles. But along the way, we do not realize the value these animals have when they come into your life, the value they give you, and so what happened with me is I had a severe moment of anxiety, and when I hold on to one of my pets for cuddles, it calms down. But I I stopped to think, well, why is this calming me? It cannot only be that touch, not only. And then I realized by observing them, Donna, that they were slowing my breathing down because I was focusing on them and they're only focused in the present moment. And it was so beautiful. And then slowly I started practicing this more and more. And they do this for me more than breath work and more than meditation. Just by stroking your animal, stroking it and watching it while you breathe, it is so, so gentle and so soothing. But you're bringing it even to another level where you are saying, hey, you're not alone here. He or she came into your life for a reason. Take advantage of that knowledge and explore that even more. Why is she or he there with you at that moment? And then, if we're able to communicate with the pet, that is golden. And this is even for a teenager who's going through sadness or not feeling heard or understood, and even adults having that pet, and even the elderly when they're alone in their house, and having that way to now build on a different their relationship at a different level. And I think slowly the loneliness it won't go away, but it will definitely minimize because you feel now there is another living soul next to you. Am I making any sense, Donna? Did you experience that in your sadness when you felt humans were not really okay in your life?
You know, absolutely. I think that. there is a connection. So let's just use your connection where you had this anxiety.
Terrible.
You know, let's even back it up even further because I think if for those who believe that they can't do it and I can do it or whoever can do
Yeah.
it, the actual choice of you coming together is the communication. So that's an unspoken act that occurs. You pick the drew you to that animal. I mean, and so there you have that silent communication that's already occurring. But
Yes.
we don't view it that way. We think, oh, I just picked this animal. Well, why do you think you did that? Why this one and not that one?
Hmm.
Why did I end up, what? Because the spiritual journey that is written for that for you two to connect. So
Hmm.
what happens, I think, when there's an anxiety or when there's for myself a trauma, there's the nervous system is wired and hyper in a hypervigilant state, and it can't unto itself in that moment come into centering, and the presence of that spirit next to you, the presence of that being is so centering that you're able to really balance yourself. And it's not that the animal gives that to you. What the animal gives is you the capacity to be the best of who you are next to them.
I love that. I
We
love
think, oh, this animal makes me this animal makes me that. But after years of this, I realized that being in that grounded presence, I was able to be all that I am. When another place I couldn't because I was afraid of this man or this man. You know what I mean? And so therein lies the observation of saying, wow, when I stand next to that horse, my face looks different. Because why? Not because he's giving that to me. He's holding a space for me to be all that I am. And that's how I began to see that I am not this nervous Nelly. I am a spiritual being. I am one solid. I have the ability to center. And he helped me see that. And so we have, like you said, thousands of years. So this relationship is something that I had not experienced in this lifetime,
it. Hmm.
probably never will in this lifetime,
Hmm.
but he's in spirit now, and I know there'll be more once I leave this lifetime.
So when you said, for example, with Sweetie, and Sweetie said, it's not my leg, it's my gut. Okay, so this was you understanding what Sweetie was going through. How about us humans? So let's say we have a problem with our leg. Now it's the other way around. How can our animal help us with this? Is there have you encountered that with people
You
to
know,
heal?
again, it depends on the journey.
Yeah,
Yes, in some cases, and if you ask,
yeah,
an animal can respond.
okay,
Another way of understanding is an animal will very often reflect in their behavior what
yes,
you need to see about yourself.
yes.
So that's another level, because if there's a dog that's acting out or a dog that, is not behaving the way you want, we as a culture say it's the dog, but it's never the dog that's the problem. I will assert that.
Yeah,
And so if we have the capacity to say, oh, what is this being trying to show me
yeah,
with this behavior? What is this? What is he mirroring back to me? I'll show you a quick case.
yeah.
Is a woman that had a cat, and the cat was chewing, 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 chewing. So she said to me, why we get antibiotic with this, with that. And then I asked the cat, and he said, not my problem, it's hers. So I went to her and I said, is there anything in your life? No, I'm fine. So then I go back to the cat, and the cat says, no, she's not. So then I started to ask her more questions. Is there anything? Oh yeah, well, my boyfriend just left me. Oh yeah, well, my mother just died. Oh yeah, well, and so I was like, oh my goodness, he doesn't need the remedy. You need the remedy. And so after that call, she emailed me and she says, he stopped scratching his neck right after we spoke. And why is that? Because he delivered the message, go
Mm,
get it together.
yeah.
Understand what your grief is. So he was reflecting that agitation in scratching his neck. Now, is it always that across the board? It's always different. But we want to tune ourselves in to really understanding what is actually happening here. And sometimes you need to reach out to a communicator. And after a period of time, I always like to suggest to begin to create the connection
Hmm.
to speak to them as if they were your children.
Nice.
And why do I say that? Because telepathy is really the sending and receiving of information. What is the information before our words are words? And by the way, in any language. So you can speak your language, I could speak my, it's not the language, it's the energy behind the words and the intention that,
Mm,
so if you say, do you want to go outside? You're
mhm.
saying, do you want to go outside? You could say it in German, you could say it in Chinese, you could say it in English. They don't pick up the word, they pick up the visual that comes with the word.
And you can even think it. So you can look at
Yes,
your animal and just
yes.
think. Yeah. That happened to me. Just
And
think.
that's how they communicate with each other. And that's how, and I, at first you might feel, oh, this is crazy, but I promise you that if you make that a habit, then the connection becomes tighter because there's a wavelength that you're actually conscious of connecting. Now, our culture is the animals live in their universe, we live in our universe. Well, this conversation joins your worlds so that you're under in the same universe.
Correct, correct. So, for example, if you want to listen to a particular channel on your radio, you tune it to a
Exactly.
frequency. And I think what you're also saying is it's practice. It's like a muscle. You practice it more and it becomes easier and easier. I have not reached that stages yet where I can, okay, well, I have Nico right there on my bed. Okay, Nico, in my mind, I haven't reached that stages yet because and maybe I won't, but I'm enjoying this journey right now, Donna. I really am. I have still moments of, we all do, right? We have moments of sadness and then anxiety. And because of this knowledge that has opened up to me, I'm not looking at my doggies, oh, it's time to eat now. I have to walk them. That's not only it. This is not the relationship. And of course, we play and we snuggle and we laugh. But now my relationship with them has gone onto another level. And I have to also share with you spiritually. I always considered myself a spiritual person, and I practiced meditation in the Himalayas for. I got I learned meditation in the Himalayas from my master, and about 30 years ago. So I would practice my meditation and yes, but then when Gina passed, and this is where I feel where Gina really taught me lessons because when she transitioned, I was like, where did you go? How you were such a ball of energy, like how? And it wasn't looking at her empty bowl or her leash. That wasn't it. It was beyond that emotion. It was an emotion. And so I went back and I delved into my books. I went back into my closet and there was, again, I pulled out a book that I had read 20 years ago, and it was by Swami Paramahansa Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi. And my master has always said to me in the Himalayas, Nita, please read that book because it's so important. So I read it again and it had a complete different meaning because, and this only was 5 years ago, okay? Complete different meaning for me, Donna. I opened it up, I started reading it barely 2 weeks after Gina transitioned, and bam, a chapter came out at me. And this chapter was all about how we are all energy. We hardly matter, or maybe not, how we're all energy. It opened up a knowledge to the metaphysics, how we're all connected. And I got really into that. And that's why when you speak to me about this, I'm understanding you better. And we don't need to read all this. It's if we're we're talking to all of you, the viewers. We don't need to know or learn all these things as long as we know that this precious soul that's come into our life has so much love and so much wisdom that we are not tapping into. And here's where you say to us, we already are able to communicate. We just need to practice a bit and find, like, keep doing it. And right, Donna, a bit.
Without a doubt, it's really being, you had mentioned, the intuitive muscle. It's really toning up that intuitive muscle. And so, you want abs that are gorgeous, you're going to the gym every day. And
Yeah,
so if you want an intuitive muscle that's tuned in, you
yeah,
have to use it every day.
yeah.
And that's what therein lies the formula for the constant communication. And it's a little bit off the beaten path for what we know, which is why it's a stretch, to start to communicate and really put your heart and soul and energy into those questions. Or do you want to go outside, or show me and then you ask a question and you pause in that silence. You see that a nanosecond, and see what comes back. Nothing comes back. You don't stop and say, I can't do it. Because by definition, you can do it.
Yeah.
So whatever you have to say, or someone has to say that they can't, that's a lie. And if you just know that that's a lie and not give up until it's not a lie,
Mm-hmm.
then you're onto something. Do you know
And
what I
you're
mean?
on.
Because you're a human. And it's built in. It's just a little covered over. And if you can't access it in the moment that you think you should access it, then they say, okay, I can't.
So when they communicate back to you, it doesn't have to be in a voice you hear. Please, please tell us all in what ways you can, you know, they can,
You
you
know,
can.
for the most part, it's everyone's individual. Sometimes it's just an inner knowing. Sometimes it's a gut feeling. Sometimes it's a visual picture. Sometimes it's a sentence, depending how, domesticated the animal is. Sometimes you'll hear, your intuition will interpret that to the way your mind needs to hear it. So it varies. But the biggest problem is that it comes in. That's a given. What we do with it when it gets there is the problem. Because then starts, gee, I don't know. Did I really get that? I don't think that did. No, that can't be.
The
And there
doubt.
you push it up. There's your blank. There, that's why you don't. No, that can't. I couldn't. No, I think he said that, but did he that? And they're going, oh my God, of course I did. But that's practice also to see
That's
that you
right.
actually do that and say, oh, there I did it again. Because when you negate it, you diminish the frequency. Because that negating is a lower
It's a
frequency.
lower frequency. Oh, you know a lot, Donna. You know a lot with the frequencies. Donna, when Oliver, my golden retriever, transitioned last November on Thanksgiving, of course, we never accept the fact that it's the right moment, but it is. Um, I was inconsolable, and I I said, "Oh gosh, Oliver, can you hear me now? You're not here. Can you see me?" So after they have passed on, have you had an experience, because it did happen to me. Oliver did come back to me for a split second on my bed, and I did not imagine that. Has that happened to you?
It does. It happens, the way that it works, and this is something important, I think, to know what happens when we all pass. We all become that part of the all. So, but in that moment of actually even just thinking of your animal or your deceased being, person in your life, they're there.
Yeah.
So they're not there in the way in the physical form, but the energy's there. And that just comes with one thought. Okay, so again, if you kind of are aware of that fact, then you become more attuned to the presence. And I really encourage that conversation that you're having while they're in their body to continue that conversation when they're
Mm-hmm.
out of their body.
Mm-hmm.
And, because we look, and I will say this also, that animals never say, "Oh, I'm going to show my spirit on the window. Make sure you look at the window tonight at seven
Yeah.
o'clock." Doesn't happen that way. So
Mm-hmm.
he didn't tell you, "Oh, I'm going to sit on the corner of your bed in about 25 minutes. Make sure you're looking." It just happens. And
Mm-hmm.
so, then you didn't negate it. You knew, you had that inner knowing that that was the spirit, that was the energy that made contact. And so there you were ready to receive it.
Mm-hmm.
But when that doesn't occur, does not necessarily mean they're not there.
Yeah. Yes.
One of the things I like to suggest when people lose their animal or their animal transitions is to get a chime of sorts that you love the sound so that, because we tend to think out of body. I mean, it's not that we think that. It's not all of us, but that's our culture is they're gone. And if there's a chime that rings, they're ringing the chime and it reminds you, oh, that was him.
That's
So
a
that you could,
great idea.
yeah, so you could start to recondition the way you relate. Because when they're in spirit, there's no body. There's a very habitual way of relating when they're in their body. But truthfully, you're really relating with their spirit, even when they're in their body.
Correct. Correct. Donna, I could ask you a lot more questions and want to learn more from you because it is a topic that is very important right now. What I'm going through in my life, this soul connection now between me and my doggies, and we were all going through difficulties and this delving deep into that wisdom. Well, right now I am practicing the present moment. It really helps so much. And I wish, I could talk to you forever, but I can't. But and you can't. Your time is also so precious. But I have two things to ask you. The first one is obviously we're going to show all our viewers your website, contact details, everything. Now, please can you tell us all what you offer? So let's say can we call you for a session with animal communication, or do you even give workshops on how to communicate? What all can you help us with?
I do all of the above. The best way to contact me is through the website.
Yes.
And generally, what happens is I will receive the information from the website, and then we set up a time to chat. And then, I'll send a Zoom link. It's very similar to this. And then we set up a session. I generally like to have a photo of the animal, whether they're in spirit or whether they're not. So I offer animal communication consultations. I offer animal and spirit consultations. I do teach classes. I'm developing a 3 or 4 part class for animals and spirit right now that I'm going to have on demand as well as live. Homeopathic is very important to me as well.
Correct.
And so I do teach homeopathy as well. And then, come to understand that, you're the purpose of your journey with your animal. So yes, I do offer all of the above.
That
I'm
is wonderful to hear. Me myself personally, I'd be very interested in your classes, and I can't wait when you are done developing that. So yes, it's good to hear that you can offer all this. And Don, I have one last question for you. What is the most powerful message you've ever received from an animal about love, loyalty, or purpose?
I have to say that the animals, while we all know that love is the answer, I have not seen an animal. I mean, yes, sometimes they'll say, yeah, love is the most important thing, or the love, in answer to that question, I think that each and every one of us can answer that for ourselves, and that the love that is experienced by you with these beings is your answer. So to say to someone who's been traumatized, or someone who's in a nervous state, or someone who well, is you telling them, love is the most important thing. Well, we all know that, but how do you get there? So it
Hmm.
is, purpose is very individual. Soul's purpose, soul's journey, soul's
Mhm.
lessons. I don't experience the animals as saying, you need to love more, and you need to this more, and you need to that more. They come to our lives, and it's really important to experience what happens when we experience them. And therein lies your answer. And
Beautiful,
what is that? Generally, it's love.
beautiful. Donna, thank you so much.
You're very
I
welcome. Thank you for
appreciate
having me.
you. I appreciate your time. We all appreciate you. And I think you're leaving us with very thought provoking um, messages that are now, we are, going to act upon it definitely. And I really thank you for this. And everyone, get in touch with Donna if you want more information, more lessons on or how to communicate with your animals, and even communicate with your animals. You're struggling right now with something and maybe want a little head start on what's going on. You can all communicate with Donna. Donna, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, and we will be in touch.
We will.